rate, but we agree on
我已经审判，你怎么就判决了呢？
that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about national.
It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple.
华为是不会有任何的后门。
少量问题的挫折，我们也不能恨一个美国。
For the very first time.
谢谢。
Hello and welcome to A Coffee with Ren. I'm Tian Wei. They say a good conversation could be just like drinking a cup of black coffee, as stimulating and probably as hard. Well, I'm not sure whether today's conversation is going to be a really difficult one, but certainly stimulating intellectually and thought-provoking. If you take a look at the panelists on the stage, they are trailblazers in their respective fields and certainly very outspoken about the challenges that we are facing today. First up, A Coffee with Ren, so let's start with Ren. Ren 先生, so you can't go to the US anymore, that's why you bring all your friends to China for coffee?
尼古拉斯先生呢是乔布斯的老师。
Professor Negroponte was a teacher of Steve Jobs, and his son was once Jobs' roommate. That means by becoming his student today, I am becoming one of Jobs' peers. I feel very honored.
我感到无上的光荣。
That's it? What about George? 那 George 呢？
多尔斯呢，他给那个我们黄老师写了一本书，写了序言。
For Mr. Gilder, he wrote the preface for Built on Value, a book by Professor Huang Weiwei. The preface is excellent, and I greatly admire him.
我非常崇拜他。
Okay, but I want to turn the table to both of you here. Aren't you being afraid of being politically incorrect? Coming to China and sitting here in the sitting room of Huawei, well knowing what's going on between US and China?
No, I think that I can contribute to saving the United States in this from a terrible mistake that it's currently making, epitomized by their stupid bans and tariffs and restrictions on Huawei. But also, I can contribute to reconstruction of internet architecture to address the terrible security collapse across the internet that makes everybody paranoid and nobody trusts anybody else. And it's really a technical problem that Huawei can address, not a political problem.
Are we facing a technical problem or a political problem, Nicholas?
I am more of the feeling that we're facing a cultural problem. And I'm here for a different reason. And I invited myself to come here and even told Mr. Ren what day I could come. And it was surprising that George, whom I've known for 40 years, was here on the same day. So I'm very pleased.
And who do not agree with you on any of the
we
subjects.
We don't agree on political issues.
What do we disagree on?
Oh, George. At any rate, but we agree on the fact that the United States is making a terrible mistake. First of all, picking on a company. I was on the Motorola board of directors for 15 years. One of the first joint ventures you did was probably with Motorola. I suspect it was. And my interest is open information, open science. I come from a world where what we value isn't so much trade and commerce and stock values. We value knowledge, and we want to build on the people before. And the only way this works is if people are open at the beginning, and we can all build on each other. And that's, to me, the priority. There are other issues, and I'm not denying them, but that's the one I'm focused on. How does the world collaborate? It's not a competitive world in the early stages of science. It benefits from collaboration.
任先生，有人说
Mr. Ren, someone says it is a technical issue and some believe it's a cultural issue. Then what do you think? What kind of issue are we facing here?
我觉得人类社会的最主要的目的是要创造财富，使更多的人来摆脱贫穷。那社会呢，一定是要是合作共赢的。
I think the most important goal for our society is to create wealth so that more people can be lifted out of poverty. Social progress requires collaboration for shared success. It's simply impossible for individual countries to develop on their own in the information world. In the industrial era, transportation problems led to geopolitics and geoeconomics, so a country could manufacture sewing machines and tractors entirely on its own. But in the information era, it's impossible for a country to single-handedly make anything. That's why open collaboration worldwide is a must. Only through open collaboration can we meet people's demands and bring the benefits of new technologies to more people at lower costs.
让更多人享受到新的技术带来的这个福祉。我认为人类社会还是要走向一种共同的合作发展，才是一条真正的道路。
I believe collaboration is the only way to make social progress. Economic globalization was first proposed in the West. We believe it is a great concept. There definitely have been and will be ups and downs during the process of economic globalization, and we need to take the right approaches to these ups and downs. That means we need to use laws and rules to reconcile and resolve issues instead of imposing extreme restrictions.
而不是采取一种极端的方法。人类的文明呢，往往是科学家有了发现。
The progress of human civilization is built upon the discoveries and innovations of scientists, the leadership and facilitation of politicians, the products and markets of entrepreneurs, and the joint efforts of all people. That's how we create new wealth. During the Dark Ages, famine was prevalent in Europe. About 40 to 50 years ago, China was very poor, and people suffered from hunger. But now we have an abundance of food. Why is that? It's not because the natural environment has changed much since then. It is the result of advances in science and technology.
就是科学技术的进步，给人类带来了新的幸福。
I think, Mr. Ren, you sound very philosophical. I'm going to ask you a very concrete question. That is, what are you going to do with those American companies who do not provide Huawei anymore, components and parts, despite of the fact you had contracts before?
第一点呢，这个美国公司他们是富有道德良心的。
All of the U.S. companies that we work with are great companies that hold themselves to high standards in terms of business integrity and ethics. Huawei's development over the past 30 years can be attributed in large part to the support and help we have received from leading companies around the world. The current setbacks we are facing are not caused by those American companies, but by politicians who see things differently from the way we see them. We predicted long ago that we would encounter market competition issues and conflicts when our growth is fast, but we never imagined that the U.S. government would be so committed to attacking Huawei within such a broad scope. The U.S. government is banning U.S. companies from supplying components to us. They are also restricting our participation in international organizations and our cooperation with universities. That said, these restrictions will not stop Huawei from forging ahead. We did not expect that the U.S. government would launch such precise strikes against us, with each strike hitting our vital parts. We did not expect such extreme measures, but we did make some preparations. We are like a bullet-riddled aircraft during World War II. We are prepared to protect our core components only, like our fuel tank. We did not prepare to protect non-core components. In the coming years, our production capacity may decrease, and our sales revenue will be about $30 billion lower than forecasted. In 2019 and next year, our annual sales revenue will be about $100 billion, but maybe in 2021, we will regain our growth momentum and provide even better services to society. In the next 2 years, we are going to switch from many old product versions to new ones. In such a massive switchover, it will take time to test whether things work properly, so a moderate decline is understandable. But when this step is finished, we'll become stronger. When we were not as strong as in the past, we were determined to work more closely with U.S. companies. As we become stronger, we will work even more closely with them. Companies that are not as strong as Huawei might be very cautious when it comes to using U.S. components or U.S. elements. This will hurt the U.S. economy in one way or another. But Huawei will not hurt very much. We are already strong, and we can withstand whatever is thrown at us.
因为我们已经很坚强了，我们是打不死的鸟，对不对？
是吧？ So what about that? It seems that Mr. Ren gave us a lot of information earlier about the bottom line he's thinking about. George?
Well, I think it's absolutely important that all these new ventures be founded on a level of a ground state of security, on which these innovations can depend, and which make them trustworthy, recognizably trustworthy around the world. It's what the new generation of technologists around the world are working on and developing, and I think it should be incorporated in this Huawei plan for the future.
But what about standards? Since we talk about security, since we talk about some specific issues, Mr. Negroponte, what about standards? Do we have global standards? And how fast can we build the global standard? Do we want to build a global standard?
Well, first of all, I've been doing this so long that when I was first on the internet, I knew everybody else on it. That's how long ago it was. And nobody imagined how it would grow. And if they tell you now they're being revisionists, it was not in any way imagined to be this dominant. And I experienced over my life, first as a teenager, I experienced Sputnik. It's very interesting because Sputnik caused the United States to do things that it wasn't already doing. So this is your Sputnik moment. What the United States has done created Huawei's Sputnik. And you are going to wake up and do things. And there's no going back. I saw it again in the 1980s with Japan. Terrified by Japan. And there was a whole period when Japan was this enemy, and we were not supposed to collaborate, and yet that sort of attenuated. So now we're going through a Japan moment in China, and I hope that plays itself out. Standards are important, but not as important as they used to be, partly because you have enough intelligence in the system that you don't have to necessarily have a precise standard that everybody's following, as long as the systems can recognize what it is and say, oh, that's that signal, and adapt itself. So there is a change, but there's importance to collaborate on sort of, let me call it the basis of knowledge, because if we start going in other directions separately, it's going to be an enormous shame, and we should shame in all senses of the word.
It's crucial when they sit together for the very first time and take direct questions. Ren Zhengfei, the legendary leader of Huawei, together with his American counterparts, they will open up about a world, an industry, and a life at its crossroads. Real talk with real trailblazers, only on CGTN.
At any rate, but we agree on
我已经审判，你怎么就判决了呢？
that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about nationalism.
It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple.
华为是不会有任何的后门。
少量问题挫折，我们也不能恨一个美国。
For the very first time.
谢谢。
Talking about basis of knowledge, I really need to ask Mr. Ren, because right now, Huawei's collaboration with quite a number of American universities and labs have been halted. And that is not going to contribute to the open science as we speak. But to Mr. Ren, though, it's also going to have a big impact on where Huawei could be in terms of your capacity for science and technology.
人类的这个社会的创造呢，就分成理论的创造、工程的创造和市场需求的创造。
Inventions can be divided into theoretical inventions, engineering inventions, and inventions driven by market demand. China is very strong in engineering inventions, but weak when it comes to theoretical research. We have to diligently learn from the West in this regard. The West took several hundred years to invent theories like calculus. They have contributed greatly to advancing basic theories.
我认为这一点来说，西方做出了很大贡献。华为公司虽然每年投入巨额的基金，
Huawei invests heavily in R&D. We have more than 80,000 engineers. Despite that, we have not made any great inventions. Mobile communications were not invented by Huawei, nor were fiber communications, IP transmission, mobile internet, airplanes, cars, or horse-drawn carriages. When it comes to inventions, we make little contribution to humanity. We have focused on improving engineering capabilities. We are now supporting more than 300 universities and 900 research institutes around the world. In doing so, we hope that we can contribute to theoretical innovation. We will not cut our investment in this area just because of the attacks on Huawei. We will work harder. Even if the U.S. government does not allow some universities to work with us, there are many others who are willing to do so. It is understandable that a few universities are having concerns about working with us. It is just short-term because they don't know much about us. We welcome more U.S. politicians to come and visit Huawei themselves. Some of them may think we still live in grass huts and have long ponytails. If they come and look at Huawei's pace of innovation, they will believe that it is worthwhile to make friends with us and that we can be trusted.
他会觉得我们应该也是好朋友，应该是可以是可信的。 刚才乔治教授讲了，将来要打建一个可信的网络。
Just now, Professor Gilder mentioned building trustworthy networks. Huawei is determined to do that, and it is also a decision included in our business plan. In the next 5 years, we will invest $100 billion in reshaping network architecture so that networks can be simpler, faster, more secure, and more trustworthy. At the very least, we should be able to meet the standards of Europe's GDPR when it comes to privacy protection. Of course, our revenue will need to double. If we face financial difficulties, we may cut our R&D investment, but the amount will still be close to that figure. We need to restructure networks and make more contributions to humanity.
因为你想一想，在非洲那个非极端贫穷的地方。
We also need to look at Huawei's contributions to society. Huawei's employees are everywhere, in the poorest areas of Africa, in places stricken with malaria, Ebola, or AIDS, and in the wilderness. We don't make much money there. We are there because of the commitment we have for humanity. Since we have not contributed much to theories, we want to contribute more to serving humanity.
多做一点贡献，来弥补我们在理论上还没有发明吧。
Contributing to the humanity, that's a great thing. Also have good market, that's a good thing too, I guess. To you, Mr. Gilder, talking about security earlier, Mr. Ren has mentioned about that. So there are a lot of questions whether Huawei has backdoors. But to you, whose security is it? Who will guarantee the security? Who are the ones to judge whether one system or another system has security or not?
Well, the question is an objective question, whether a specific telecom system can be tested, whether it is open. There are lots of technical remedies for the kinds of distrust that arises around this catastrophically insecure internet architecture that we find ourselves using today. Just as we have a catastrophically broken monetary system, we got which causes trade wars. We also have a catastrophically broken internet security system. And I think Huawei can contribute. Among all the companies in the world, Huawei is probably best situated to solve both these problems, or to pursue both that single opportunity.
Is Mr. Gilder having too much hope for Huawei? Is he being too optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I hope he's correct. And there's some evidence that he may be, because our president has already said publicly that he would reconsider Huawei if we can make a trade deal. So clearly it's not about national security. We don't trade national security. So it's about something else. And this trade war has got to end. And that, I believe, will end sooner rather than later. Crossing my fingers.
However, Mr. Ren, I have to ask you, you need to respond to that too.
我认为第一点呢，把网络安全和信息安全作为两个问题，要分离开来说。
First, we need to separate the issues of cybersecurity and information security. Cybersecurity relates to the networks connecting our society. We can't ever allow these networks to break down or malfunction, and this is a security issue. These networks need to connect 6.5 billion people, tens of millions of banks, and hundreds of millions of SMEs and large companies. For a bank transaction to take place on a network that connects 6.5 billion people, the transaction must be able to accurately link the right individuals and transfer the correct amount. This is a cybersecurity responsibility. Huawei is responsible for providing connections to 3 billion people and provides connections for banks, businesses, and governments. Over the past 30 years, Huawei's networks, spread across 170 countries, have never broken down, proving that our networks are secure.
这个网络是安全的，那个信息安全呢？
In terms of information security, we provide pipes and taps, which we refer to as networks and devices, respectively. The pipes do not determine what passes through them, which could be water or oil. Instead, carriers and content providers determine this. In regard to whether Huawei installs backdoors, we don't have any backdoors at all. We are willing to sign no backdoor and no spy agreements with any country. Why haven't we signed any, you might ask? Because some countries have required that all network equipment suppliers would have to sign such an agreement. This raises the bar in these countries and makes things more difficult. Why not just sign an agreement with us first? Huawei can set an example, and then these countries can use this example to negotiate with other suppliers.
就有个榜样，然后拿着我的这个范本去给别人谈。很多国家的总统我都谈过。
I've discussed this topic with many state leaders. Once we get an agreement signed, we can set an example, and everyone will see that Huawei is bold enough to enter into such agreements. We can guarantee that we won't install backdoors, and we can then take on further responsibilities.
承担这个责任的，对吧？安全与不安全是相对的。
Whether something is secure or not is relative. The thickness of the atmosphere in the physical world is about 1,000 kilometers, but the information cloud will be much thicker than that. In a cloud that thick, errors are inevitable. For example, if a lightning strikes the wrong place, what can we do? We should investigate accountability, correct the mistake, and impose punishments. Attacking a company from all sides without fair reasons is unacceptable. Countries following the rule of law must act based on laws. How can they make judgments without even holding trials? As the cloud society continues to develop and the number of portals increases, we will become more prone to making mistakes. If a society cannot tolerate even a single error, it is too conservative. Such a society will lose its drive for progress and creation.
这社会就保守了，而不是一种开放，不是一种进取，不是一种创造的社会。美国呢是一个先进发达的国家。
The U.S. is a developed country, and we know that long ago the U.S. was an undiscovered continent. After the Puritans arrived, they started introducing British laws and regulations. The U.S. gradually became more open and developed into the strongest nation in the world. We have a lot to learn from the U.S. A few setbacks will not make us suddenly start hating them. The U.S. has a long history, and these recent events only make up a very small part of its history. If we started hating the U.S. forever because of this, we would be pushing ourselves backwards. We must learn from the U.S. This is the only way that we can remain a leader in the industry.
作为一个行业的领导者存在。
Interesting what Mr. Ren just said. He seems to have, he wants to look at the long stretch of history rather than concentrating on one specific point of time. So exactly what can we learn from history? I mean, you already also talk about history, whether it's Japan or Sputnik moment. What can we really learn? They say it's the rule of the jungle anyway.
Well, we can learn by looking at various technologies that were quite invented in the United States and then went elsewhere because we didn't have the industrial, commercial courage and ability to develop them because they took long term. I'll give you two examples. One example is flat panel displays. I had a piece of glass in my laboratory in the early 1970s. It was the beginning of flat panel displays. The United States couldn't bring it forward. It took too much investment, and so it went to Japan and then later other places. The same thing happened with, even before that, videotapes. There was a big commotion when people invented videotapes, and then off they went. We didn't develop. Same things happened with telecommunications. Government funding in my lab stopped 20 years ago, and interest in the telecommunications development went elsewhere. It's not in the United States, so let's say it's in Europe, it's at Ericsson, it's at Nokia, it's at Huawei. It's not really in the United States anymore. So history has shown that the short-term, usually quarter-to-quarter, view of American industry precludes some of these big long-term developments. And Huawei looks beyond that and has been able, witness, to develop things in 5G and other areas that couldn't happen in the way we're set up. It didn't lend itself to small entrepreneurship, and it doesn't lend itself to big American corporations the way they're currently shaped.
Mr. Gilder, many say, wow, probably we are already at the very beginning of a technological Cold War anyway. We're going to have decouple between China and the United States, or between China and some of the other countries technology-wise.
Well, I think
Are you as easygoing about the reality as Mr. Ren, and also as historical as Mr. Negroponte?
Well, I think Mr. Ren is right to be complacent. I mean, he's in the strong position. He has the 56,000 patents. He has the, this 80,000 R&D employees. He's focused on the technologies of the future. It's the United States that really will suffer from any effort to decouple. Are
you doing American bashing right now?
I'm not American. I'm an American, and I believe that we have wonderful entrepreneurial energies, wonderful creativity, and wonderful technology. But it's always thrived in collaboration with other countries. When we were an underdeveloped economy, Ford, Edison, Carnegie, all our great entrepreneurs that established the oil automobile, electrical industries stole from Europe. That was, everybody said they stole from Europe, that they sent spies into European companies and brought back crucial insights that made possible the Ford automobile. It's what we see here from historic terms is merely the incumbent established technology power of the United States challenged by an ascendant challenger, China, and we are trying to beat them back. And that's a terrible, suicidal mistake for the United States to make. So I'm being pro-American when I say America's got to deal with Huawei and with the existence of challenges around the world. We're not in the lead in semiconductors anymore. This idea that we have some impregnable lead in semiconductors that we can use to negotiate, force China into compliance with some requirements that we imagine is wrong. We don't lead in semiconductors. Taiwan leads us in semiconductors. I mean, it's just false that the United States is in an impregnable position. It doesn't have to collaborate with China and other countries around the world. It's an illusion from years gone by, and we've got to get over it if we're going to accept the challenges of the future and accomplish the goals we have.
总体来说呢，美国的科学技术呢是比中国先进和发达的。
First, generally speaking, the U.S. still has more advanced science and technology than China. After all, China is still catching up. China has made much progress over the past 40 years since the reform and opening up, but the U.S. has been developing for 100 or 200 years. So, the U.S. has a more solid foundation for innovation. Suppose the world is a river. The U.S. is a bit like water at the upper reaches, which will naturally flow downstream. If the water upstream does not flow down, the lower end of the river will dry up. However, the upper reaches will also dry up without lower reaches. This is similar to our value chain. Downstream market demand is critical for those in the upstream. Therefore, technological decoupling goes against the trends of historical development. Second, the law of the jungle does not fit into human society. Humans need to collaborate for shared success, and various forces need to be balanced. That's why we have adopted a market economy rather than a planned economy. Although the counterbalance between various factors in a market economy will cause some waste, it underpins orderly development of the market. In addition, human society is also governed by laws, regulations, religions, and moral codes. All those factors prevent the world from simply following the law of the jungle. Many countries have also issued anti-monopoly laws to prevent one lion from becoming too strong in order to maintain balanced development. While Huawei happens to have some of the leading advantages in 5G, we will not be complacent. We still want to openly collaborate with the rest of the world. So, I think technological decoupling between China and the U.S. is in no one's interests. Both sides would suffer.
So
it seems that Huawei has already long decided that you can not only survive, but also thrive after this round of crisis.
I don't like people describing the world using the law of jungle either. Everyone knows that tigers and lions are the strongest animals and no one can defeat them. But how have humans achieved what we have today? It is through unity and collaboration. I think that's the law that always holds up well. Many people wonder whether Huawei is facing unprecedented pressure and difficulties. Honestly, I don't think this is the biggest problem or challenge we've ever faced during my 25 years with the company. I think the most difficult time was when Mr. Ren founded the company. We didn't have money, technology, or people. We had nothing back then, but we managed to develop into what we are today. Once a problem, issue, or challenge appears, Huawei always meets it head-on and works hard to resolve it. That's what we've been doing for the past 3 decades, and we will continue to do so in the future.
面对问题，面对挑战，然后去解决它。
Another thing, we could not only just concentrate our conversation on Huawei and the current specific point of challenge, but rather where we're going from here. Every one of us. Mr. Ren has been very passionate about 5G. That's certainly going to build the infrastructure in the world to empower communication and many others. Mr. Gilder has been, over the years, arguing about that artificial intelligence is not going to replace human being, but human capacity and also human brain is enormous. Meanwhile, Mr. Negroponte, you have been arguing in many of your speeches and books about the biotech is the new digital, as you have written a book, Being Digital, back in the 1990s.
It's the
Everybody
old
read it.
digital.
Yeah, well, and you argue even that we can probably eat a pill from now on and learn Chinese, not through the eyes, but through within the body. So what kind of future?
You don't
From
really say that.
Yes, I do.
Yes, he did. He talked about French, learning
I say
French.
it. That doesn't mean it's true.
It certainly isn't true, so I'm glad that...
But it could be.
No, it couldn't be.
Yes, well...
No, ideas are not
Let's
material.
start. Let me ask one by one if we can, and Crossfire is also welcomed here on the stage. About where are we talking about, and what would you concentrate about the bigger trend? Let's start from what many call a futurist. Mr. Gilder?
I believe that the basic challenge of the world economy today is to address the scandal of money. We today have $5.1 trillion every 24 hours of currency trading. And this currency trading accomplishes nothing except to endow central banks with the right to steal from the future in order to consume in the present, and steal from future generations. And I believe that the real reason for the trade war is not trade, it's the collapse of money. The great contribution of blockchains is to allow a new global currency that plays the role that gold played for hundreds of years of the fastest growth of the world economy. And that's really what blockchain, not only a new internet architecture, but also a new global architecture for the world economy. But money, which is a critical measuring stick, is different all around the world. It's being manipulated by national central banks, and so we have a chaos of money. And that's why the world economy is slowing down now, is why trade is no longer growing, why countries are constantly fragmenting and fighting over valuations. And I think this is the big opportunity. I think Huawei can play a key role in surmounting this challenge.
We'll let Mr. Ren to respond a bit later, but for you, Mr. Negroponte, of course you disagree with your friend.
No, I don't disagree with that because I don't know enough about that. And it's fascinating to listen to. I would take, because I believe the question was, what are some of the big future trends? And I think they all surround one aspect of the scientific and technical world that has changed in the past 30 years. And that is that we can make things and design things and build things that are so small and get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller that there's been a crossover point with nature. And when I grew up, the natural world and the artificial world were very different. In fact, I was trained as an architect, and good architecture is the architecture that fits well with the natural world. But now the natural world and the artificial world are the same. And they're the same in ways that are very surprising. When I founded the Media Lab, I never imagined we would have a team, as we have today, who design mice. They design new mice. And are the mice real or are they artificial? They're manufactured, and they're walking, living mice. And so there's certain things that you think about. For example, 10 years from now, maybe Huawei will ship base stations as seeds that you plant, and you water it, and it grows. And guess what? It grows into a base station. And it's powered by the sun and the leaves, and it sort of generates, and all of a sudden you have base stations in the middle of nowhere. 10 years from now, that's perfectly plausible. So I think the changes, the reason I say biotech is the new digital, more because of synthetic biology and the fact they'll be indistinguishable. So I look in that area.
And the world of the digital is also in combination with the world of biotech.
Very much the same.
Yeah. You seem to be happy about that idea. What about your future? What do you think?
尼古拉斯所讲的呢，就是 DNA 给
Professor Negroponte was talking about what fundamental changes the convergence between DNA and electronics will bring to humanity. I am not in a position to comment because I haven't done any research on that, but I think in the next 20 to 30 years, the biggest driving force for human society will be AI. Artificial intelligence is augmenting human capabilities, but not replacing them. Society is getting more and more complicated. Trains are traveling faster and faster, and networks are also becoming more complicated. This is not something that can be handled with individual intelligence. In the future, some tasks that are certain will be directly done by AI, and the problems will be solved on the edge. Tasks that deal with uncertainties will first be transmitted to the central networks and then undergo fuzzy processing using AI. AI might get it wrong or get it right. It's a process of deeper learning to promote human progress.
人工智能可能处理错，也可以处理对，处理错、处理对都是在深度学习，为完善人类的社会。刚才我说要宽容创新。
We should be tolerant towards innovation. If there is something wrong with networks, we can now maintain them remotely. Do we still need people to climb up towers to do maintenance? This will generate high costs. So, we need to be tolerant of future-oriented innovation. This is the only way for us to build a great society. AI should not be seen as something negative. AI is an extension of human capability. As Professor Negroponte just mentioned, the concept of AI has existed for decades, but it failed to become a reality. Today, we have what it takes to make AI a reality. AI will help create more wealth for humanity, rather than replace humans. How could AI appreciate music? How could AI understand jokes? These will be addressed in the near future. Now, AI is mainly used to improve productivity.
Okay. Mr. Gilder, it seems that they are disagreeing to a certain extent with what you just said.
How large are all the connections all across the entire global internet and connections to all its memories? And I was always focusing on the point where the connectome of the global internet would pass a zettabyte. That is, all the memories and all the connections would take a zettabyte, 10 to the 21, to map. And recently I've been studying the connectome of the human brain, one human brain. The connectome of the one human brain takes an entire zettabyte. In other words, one human brain has as much connectivity as the entire global internet. Yet the entire global internet consumes gigawatts, terawatts of energy. One human brain runs on 12 to 14 watts of energy. So I believe that what really will determine human progress and prosperity is unleashing individual human zettabytes running at 12 watts. That's 6 billion of them that you're interconnecting through the Huawei fiber optics and wireless. Life is not the same as electronics.
Okay.
It manifests electronics, but it's a different phenomenon which is not well understood and is not illuminated by facile statements that we're going to be able to read Shakespeare by taking a pill. That just is not illuminating.
Mr. Negroponte, I think it's perfect time for you to speak out.
A lot of people have worked, and there are really two distinct AIs. There's the AI, if you will, that wants to do as well or better than the human brain. That's the one that is, I'll call the classic one. It's the one that the people in the 1960s and 70s, very deep thinkers, were thinking about. It was not an AI composed of 7.5 billion people. I don't know what you guys are doing with the other 1.5, by the way, when you talk about connecting everybody. Yeah. But when you have the 7.5 billion brains connected, you have something times 7.5 billion. And that's a different area and a fascinating one. And whatever happens computationally, I just know I can make more of it. I can't make more of the human brains, and ours aren't going to change that much. So things will change, George. And I think, you know, when I say you learn French by taking a pill or Chinese, that is part of a very different agenda of how do you interact with the human brain. And the breakthrough was the idea of going from the inside instead of the outside, instead of trying to radiate. What if you went through the bloodstream, and what if you were able to access all the neurons from that direction? That's pretty interesting. And I don't know where French lives. Does it live in a part of your brain? Probably not, but the process to speak French certainly does. Can you put that there? Can you take it away? It doesn't matter whether that is correct or not right now. It's certainly a very exciting way of thinking about it, and people will do things and change things as a consequence taking that kind of step.
But there's one thing I also want to ask you about. That is, you know, you talk about the potential beauty of a world in which everybody could work together, going through this current bump, but it is happening, and therefore a lot of people that I've been talking to as a journalist have real concerns whether their children's generation are really going to enjoy the kind of life that you guys have been enjoying. Mr. Negroponte, you've been working with kids a lot. $100 laptop for them to go to the world of digital. What do you think?
Right, but in full disclosure, I was born very lucky. My parents were rich, their parents were rich, and their parents were rich. I'd gone to 30 countries by the time I was 4 years old. So I didn't think of that as privilege. And none of my brothers went into business. We all went into civil service or academia.
Right.
A couple of them are artists. So our measure wasn't the same measure that you're talking about, because very often we think of measure simply as an economic growth. But after you have that economic growth, you have a purpose. And you die unhappy if you didn't really have a good purpose, and you look back at your life and you say, oh, what was that all about? Well, some people don't have that question because they've had a purpose and they're allowed to have it. But if you're struggling the whole time, it's harder. So I think that when I hear that young people won't have the same opportunities, I say to myself, well, you know, I don't think that's necessarily true, because they do have something we didn't have. Didn't matter if you were rich or poor. There was a belief that you had to work for a certain period of time. and probably hate your work.
Okay.
As a lawyer, as a banker, as a hedge fund. I mean, God, hedge funds, what an empty life that is. And then at the end, you start doing something with the rest of your life. There's sort of something happens. And I think young people have learned that that too can be more integrated. And I see many, many more young people who have mixed money and meaning.
Okay.
And I think that's the key.
That is the key. No offense, hedge funds around the world.
Well, offense hedge funds,
Yeah,
actually.
okay.
You should be ashamed of yourself if you're in the hedge fund business.
Do support education.
Yeah.
That's very important.
That's important.
Mr. Ren,
什么叫幸福？这个是一定要讲清楚的。
What is happiness? We must be clear about this. I think future generations will always be better than the previous ones. We shouldn't be always pessimistic about the kids of today. Maybe they haven't lived through the difficulties we lived through, but they are quick learners and they are quick to absorb new knowledge. Just as Professor Negroponte said, if poor children can also receive proper education, then mankind will be more able to generate more wealth and lift itself out of poverty, and the world will be a better place to live. So, I feel very positive about the future, and I believe the future generations will definitely be better than the previous ones. The current generations are definitely better than the generations 5,000 years ago, right? All of today's concerns will be resolved in 2,000 years.
2000年，我们相信他们比我们发愁的问题，他们全解决了，对吧？
what about you, Mr. Gilder?
I just think it's a foolish indulgence of rich people to believe that the future will be worse than the past. If you just look at the history of China over the last 50 years, of course every subsequent generation has had vastly more opportunities than the previous generation. All around the world, equality has increased because of poor people becoming rich everywhere.
So we have 1 minute left, 1 minute only. Everybody, one sentence only, the biggest takeaway with a coffee with Ren today.
刚讲华为是不会。
We mentioned that Huawei has no backdoors and our products are open, transparent, and trustworthy. But, this but is more important. But we will always have our front doors open. We welcome all, including the media, to come and visit us.
看来了解，谢谢。
Thank you. Mr. Gilder, one sentence.
Huawei is at the epicenter of the future of technology in the world. With how the United States and other countries react to this campaign against Huawei is kind of a Huawei test for people around the world. And if they don't pass it, it will signify that the world is taking a very destructive turn, anathematizing particular companies in the name of vague ideological objections. And so it's the Huawei test, and I hope the world meets it.
It's an interesting and important case study, I guess.
Yeah.
Mr. Negroponte.
Yeah, I guess I would end by saying in going through that test, I would not focus on security and backdoors and whether you're going to interact with the Chinese government if they can. Leave that out. And I think you should focus on the 100,000 papers you publish, the amount of research, and just make it known. Because I feel I'm a lone voice. I'm at a dinner party and I say, Huawei is a great company. And people say it is. It does. And then the world has to know how much you're doing in science and technology.
Well, I guess the media need to know too, in a way. Now our colleagues are sitting here. They all got informed, at least through this, a little bit. Mr. Ren, it's a coffee with Ren, so you have to speak first.
我觉得这个世界就是合
The
作。
world relies on open collaboration for shared success.
That's it.
He gets an A+ as my student.
He did? For the very first test.
谢谢。你看。
And with that, we're wrapping up today's first Coffee with Ren. We hope there will be many coffees to come in the future in which we can talk and interact and certainly be intellectually stimulating for one another. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen on the stage. 谢谢. And our great audience and colleagues.